You know, that's ableist to be critical of me for my hearing too. It's need to log in, but let's go ahead and start. I'll do that whilst we're doing it. We good? Good evening. I now call to order the Thursday, March 27th, 2025 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Good evening, Commissioner, staff, people present and watching at home. We will go to item 2, public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? And we do. Okay, Travis Richter, come on down. Good evening, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Travis Richter. I'm a resident of Imperial. I live on Scepter Run, which is directly across the lake from the area here on Agenda A, where we're talking about rezoning.
Time out. So I'm going to give you a chance to speak, but just for clarification. So for public comment is time for people to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda.
Okay.
For the items that are on the agenda, there are 2 tonight, and they will both have a public hearing component.
Okay.
And so if I could just get you to hold for right now.
Perfect.
When we call that item, we'll hear a report from staff, and then I'll open it for a public hearing, and you and anyone else that would like to comment can comment. So you will have an opportunity to do that, but we need to do that just as it's connected to the agenda. Okay?
Perfect. No problem at all.
All right, thank you. And I'll keep this up here, and I will remember. We'll all remember. Okay? Anyone signed up for public comment to address an item not on the agenda?
No, Chair, there is not.
Thank you. We'll go to item 3A, consideration of and action on the minutes from the March 11th meeting. You've got those minutes in your packets. Any revisions?
Motion to approve.
Got a motion to approve by Commissioner Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Dawood. C. Any further discussion? All right, please vote. I'm going to try to vote as soon as I get logged in here.
I am logged in, but
I'm not on the right one. Doesn't look right. All right. Let me take a hand vote for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, it looks like to me. So that will pass. We will now go to item 4A. At this time, we are going to discuss the proposed PD General Development Plan for Imperial Highway 6, Tract H, approximately 30 acres of land located west of State Highway 6 between Imperial Boulevard and Crown Garden Boulevard in the Alexander Hodge League Abstract number 32. We will hear a report from city staff first, from Ruth Lomer, and then I will open the public hearing, and then we'll move on to consideration and action. Anything you want to correct before we start?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, well then we'll see. I'll have questions then. Go ahead.
Okay.
Just telling you.
So we are here tonight to talk
I'll
about
give you a chance. Don't let it be said I didn't give a chance.
We are here to talk about a new plan development, general development plan for this area. It is a staff-initiated PD for approximately 30 acres out of the Highway 6 District Tract H. And this is to add residential uses to the commercial uses that are currently permitted in the area. So a little bit of background. The original PD for Imperial was approved back in 2012, and it envisioned commercial, a mix of retail and office and other types of commercial uses for this site. quite a bit of time has gone by and it has remained largely vacant, except for the development of the medical office building right here on the corner of Highway 6 and Imperial Boulevard. Over the past several years, staff has received various inquiries from developers and home builders for doing residential within this tract. And at that time, we didn't have any direction to support moving forward with residential here. And so we essentially gave them the direction that we really couldn't support it. However, since that time, we do now have some direction that would support having residential in new locations across the city. Our land use plan from 2018 has goal 3, which is encouraging residential options. And then most recently, the City Council adopted their 2025 to 2027 strategic plan, which includes an objective to create a forward-looking housing strategy to support redevelopment. So as we've been talking about with the commission, we need more homes, we need more people in Sugar Land. And so we're looking for opportunities to do that. And so we as staff identified this area as an opportunity site for new residential. In terms of the comprehensive plan, the current plan does show this as regional commercial and services, but we have recommended that we change the plan, the future land use map specifically, amending it to neighborhood activity center. So we did bring forward that proposal to the commission back in January, and the commission did unanimously make a recommendation to City Council to change the future land use map. We have not taken that forward to City Council yet. It will be going concurrently with this general development plan. And so we do have now the direction with this change to have compact residential in the area. So the proposed general development plan would be creating a new general development plan that is only for Tract H, rather than readopting the entire 690 plus acre general development plan. So I point that out because we did bring forward a proposal to you back in January, which was the general development plan for the entire almost 700 acre site. I think it was about 100 pages. There were just a few places where there were changes that were made, but I think it may have caused a little bit of confusion to have that entire document. And what we found in going back and really studying the zoning in the area is that the vast majority of the land within Imperial already has a final development plan on it. There's very limited areas that a general development plan would even apply to. And so we have opted to move forward with a general development plan that is just for this Tract H area that does not have final development plan on it. So in doing that, I did use the last general development plan as a starting point, but eliminated any references to and exhibits that were specifically for the ballpark district, the historic district, the residential area, anything that didn't apply specifically to the Highway 6 district. We also added compact residential uses, specifically live, work, townhome, and urban homes. You will note that it does not include duplex or multiplex. So that was something that was previously included when we were here in January. Those have now been removed from the proposal. We also applied the standards for these new residential uses that are that were applied in the other parts of Imperial. We went ahead and applied those here. We have heard from the community that they want to see, continue to see similar products and similar style and quality in this area as what they have in the rest of Imperial. And so thought it was appropriate to go ahead and apply those standards here. We updated Exhibit B1, which is the general land plan, to add residential for this area. And then Exhibit B2 is the permitted uses. So that has been distilled down a lot because it only includes Tract H now and includes those new uses. Excuse me. So this is just that excerpt from the area of the general land plan. So the graphic itself didn't change. It's just the text in the legend here where residential has been added as a permitted use or an allowed use in the general land plan. These are some images that are examples of the kind of housing that we're talking about. That would be potentially permitted in this area. All of these pictures are actually here in Sugar Land. Some of them are in Imperial, and then there's a couple there that are in Lake Point. But these are your townhomes and your urban homes, as well as a few live-work units that you have down here at the bottom right there. So as I mentioned, we did previously bring forward a proposal for a general development plan back in January to add some residential uses. We heard from a speaker regarding some concerns about the limited community engagement and notification that had been provided, and then just generally about multiplexes. The commission had some robust discussion after the public hearing and had some questions about the definitions of the different compact housing types, how many units could be anticipated on this site, talked a little bit about the notification of the nearby residents, as well as the value for the Imperial Redevelopment District, talked a little bit about the coordination of future residential and commercial proposals, and then the desire to evaluate other developable tracts in Imperial and kind of across the city for residential. Ultimately, there was a recommendation to approve the general development plan, but the commission voted 4-4, which resulted in a failed vote. And so the commission also asked that we re-communicate to the HOA and the neighborhood about the proposal. And so that's what we did. So following the P&Z meeting, we did discuss the concerns with residents and some representatives from the HOA. As a result of those conversations, we did go ahead and remove the multiplexes and the duplexes as permitted uses. We also hosted a community meeting on March 6th. We sent the invitation to residents that we had contact information for. Side note, the city government does not have an email address for every property owner in the city, so it's kind of whoever we have contact information for, and then ask them to share that with their friends and neighbors, and then also shared it with the HOA. The sheet that you see there on the side was a little information sheet that we provided to the residents at that meeting. So we had 15 people that attended, and overall their questions included things like the time frame of the expected development, the kind of retail that would be allowed, quality of homes being built, the process for future final development plans, and who the landowner is. So we did notice for the public hearing as required, including placing the notification in the newspaper and then notifying property owners within 200 feet. You can see on the map which properties were included within the 200 feet. In the notification, in addition to the typical public hearing notice, we also included that flyer that was from the public meeting for those people who were not able to attend. We did also place a sign at the location as well, and then sent information to the HOA and placed information on Nextdoor. Prior to noon today, which is technically the deadline for receiving feedback on the public hearing, we did receive one note of opposition, largely seeking further clarity on the regulations. I did speak to the person, and he specifically said he wasn't opposed to having residential in this area, was just generally interested in learning more about the requirements. They wanted to make sure that they were going to be part of the HOA, they were going to be paying the same, IRD taxes and things like that. I believe you may have a copy of that feedback that we got in your at your dais. Since that time, we also received 2 additional notes just of inquiry, very similar questions and comments. One asked, what is an urban home? How do you define that? One wanted to make sure there weren't going to be apartments here. Generally, people were not opposed to residential in the area, just wanting to know a little bit more about the details. And so I was able to explain that there will be another process where there will be a final development plan and those details will be ironed out. So some points for your consideration tonight. The proposed general development plan aligns with the proposed amendment to the future land use map to Neighborhood Activity Center. It supports the redevelopment all-in of creating a forward-looking housing strategy. It also allows our city to diversify our housing to meet the needs of people at different ages and stages of life, and provides us an opportunity to generate revenue by responding to current market conditions. So with all of that, we do support a recommendation of approval to City Council for the Imperial PD Highway 6 District Tract H General Development Plan and amendment to the Imperial General Land Plan, adding certain residential land uses. After tonight, we do anticipate going to City Council for a public hearing and their first consideration of the ordinance on April 15th. And I'm happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing for agenda item 4A, the proposed PD General Development Plan for Imperial Highway 6, Tract H, approximately 30 acres of land located west of State Highway 6 between Imperial Boulevard and Crown Garden Boulevard in the Alexander Hodge League, abstract number 32. We do have at least one speaker here who would like to address the commission in public hearing. That is Mr. Richter. You'll come back down, sir. Thank you for your patience. We'd love to hear from you. And we won't start your clock until you're in place.
Okay, perfect. Let me try this again. Okay. Travis Richter. I'm a resident of Imperial. I live right across the lake from this proposed area. And I do kind of echo some of the concerns of the opposition that was submitted. I'm not opposed to residential entirely. I do not want it to be entirely residential. I think that's my biggest concern overall. You know, when Johnson Development sold the houses in the area at the very beginning, they had the grand plan of this. There's going to be trolleys going through the neighborhood and taking us to all the shops and stores in the historical district, and you know, all around us there's going to be shops and restaurants. Well, the historical district, who knows if that's going to happen in our lifetime? But you know, we did end up with Talyard Brew, which thank everybody for making that happen. It's an amazing place. We walk to it. It's great for the community. If you haven't been there, it's a wonderful location. Anyway, but I would like more of that kind of thing to happen in this area, and whatever the zoning commission can do to help protect that, to make it not end up being entirely residential. You know, I would like to see some shops in there, some coffee shops, some restaurants, you know, things like that in that area that can incorporate, it adds value to the residents that are the current residents of the Imperial district, of the Imperial neighborhood. You know, that we got to kind of protect the residents that are there already. I know we're going to bring in new residents and give value to them and give value to the rest of the tax, to the city for getting more taxes and things like that. But let's also think about the residents that are in Imperial now, adding value to them as well. This is going to be part of our neighborhood now that we weren't expecting. You know, we weren't expecting these to be residential. We were expecting, you know, something much grander. This is also, you know, one of the last, you know, undeveloped areas in interior Sugar Land. It's right across from the airport. There's an opportunity to do something really special here. And hopefully, you know, we don't know what the final plan is going to be, but hopefully the zoning commission helps push for something special in this area that adds, you know, when the visitors come in and fly into the airport and the first thing they see in Sugar Land, I don't want it to be a bunch of just houses, a bunch of urban housing, and let's have something special that adds value to the airport, to the new residents or the new visitors coming in, adds value to the residents that are there. Also concerns, you know, I know there's no final plan in, but that lake there, there's no walking around that lake. There's no sidewalk. There's no trail, or, you know, the other lakes have trails, but the residents that bought property on that lake were told that there was not going to be that kind of thing on that lake. It's kind of a private lake. And I know that's not necessarily your concern, but it is our concern that when you bring in new housing, new things like that, there's going to be a lot more people that are going to have access potentially to the lake. And we want to kind of protect, you know, what we were originally sold, that this was going to be kind of a private lake, kind of go back up to commercial that didn't incorporate the lake. And we're kind of hoping that the residential that's added to this as well kind of follows, you know, that plan. You know, we want walkability. Everybody wants walkability. We have Town Center. It's an amazing piece of property. Let's add something here that brings walkability, you know, to the residents of Imperial. That's my main concern. Again, I'm not opposed to residential being added. I understand that property sat vacant for a while, and we got to kind of think outside the box here and bring in some new options. But I do want to protect that, and whatever you guys can do to protect that. I don't know if this rezoning this area as this kind of, you know, neighborhood deal. If you look at the definition of the neighborhood activity center, it does talk about walkability and things like that, and having shops among the residential. I hope that is the case. I hope it's not just residential.
Thank you. And for the record, your address, please.
I'm at 39 Scepter Run.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. And then we also have a comment from Rupert Patel on 83 Scepter Run. And we do have that at the dais. Just for the record, I'm just going to read the actual comment into the record so that we have that as part of our record. And the comment reads as follows: there needs to be more details in the guidelines to not just specify compact use as, quote, compact residential land uses on the property, dwellings, single-family attached townhomes, urban homes, and live-work, quote, to include limits to less than 2 stories from the natural ground level, same easement distance from the lake view as the houses currently there, cost sharing into the fees/taxes with the current homeowners association already contracted over the houses currently in the Imperial vicinity within 1 year of rezoning if initiated. I've now read that comment into the record. Do we have anyone else that would like to address the commission in public hearing on item 4A? Come on down. And we'll ask you to make your comments, and then when you're done, we'll get you a form if you could fill that out so we have that for the record, please. But go ahead and start with your name and your address.
My name is Kathy Cortez Richter, also a resident at 39 Scepter Run, and I'm actually opposed to residential. I think that we've already paid a hefty price. I've been in the neighborhood since it first started. There's just been so many false promises. You know, we're having to pay a really hefty tax on that redevelopment tax. And my concern is, how is this going to affect the current residential tax that we have, the extra tax we pay for the Imperial redevelopment? That there was all these plans, right? But none of that has happened, and we're having to pay this tax. And now, if they're going to have residential, that means they're going to have to build more streets. Is that going to increase our taxes and create a bigger debt that we're having to pay? You know, that the developer, you know, just sold the land and then we're the ones left paying for it. And so it's just a lot of concerns. If it does have to be residential, we ask that can we take out also the townhomes? Like, you know, nothing in our neighborhood is townhomes. They're, you know, they're homes, there's brownstones, but they're still individual homes. You know, they're not 100% connected. So it doesn't look like, you know, we're not living in the city, right? And like, you know, so it wouldn't match, you know, the entire neighborhood. And like, you know, the previous speaker, like, it would be nice to have retail. And when they completely rezone it and make it strictly residential, that completely kills the chances of us having anything within walking distance, you know. That land stood still because it wasn't sold, right? They were holding on to it. Johnson Development was holding on to all that. Nobody was developing because everything was put on the Imperial idea of, you know, behind the sugar factory, you know, so everything was on hold for like 5 years. When that didn't happen, they moved on to another developer because they couldn't find the funding. Now all of a sudden they sold the land and it's getting ready to redevelop. And I feel like the city needs to be really cautious about what we decide to do with this now that it's actually moving forward. And I appreciate that y'all involved the residents this time around, because prior to this, there's not a lot of communication. So we do have a say-so, and we live there, and that's our backyard. So thank you.
Thank you. And if you'll get a form. Oh, she's Lisa right here has got one for you. Okay, anyone else for public hearing for item 4A? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Ruth, come on up, and I will ask my colleagues if anyone has questions for staff. If that's a no, I'll start. But okay, I'll start. Whoever says, I'll try to go outside and work my way in. But since you spoke up, you may go first.
All right. Thanks, Ruth, for the presentation. One item that I had for clarity on, where is it at, so I can get you to the same place. It's under item F, number 2B. It's the residential lots with rear access.
Yes.
It could have been something that didn't come out, but I don't believe you would need anything in there around lots facing Ulrich Street. Is that correct? F2B, and then you go down to 7. Yeah.
Good catch. Thank you.
All right. Then the rest of
remove
them are
that.
on uses. So,
Okay.
I know we're looking for a blended residential and housing, so it's sort of based on that. There's one, it's in the building materials. and we've left in lumber and other building materials. We wouldn't really be expecting a lumber yard or anything coming in there, right?
Can you remind me what number that is?
It's 52
Thank you.
on the permitted uses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going through the list of permitted uses.
Retail, trade, building materials.
So I wasn't quite sure, is that what that would mean?
I mean, you could have
Or
like
is
an
it just more like a hardware store?
You could have like an Ace Hardware. They sell lumber, right? I don't know. I mean, you probably wouldn't. I mean, yeah, you might not want like a big lumber yard. I'm trying to think where the limitations on there, what they are
But
under
then
the
what you
notes
might
at the
want to do
end.
is make sure that they don't have any outside storage as one of the other, it's number 11.
Okay,
That may be something that would clarify that.
we can add
Because it would
that.
just be within the, within the actual
Yeah,
structure, right?
yeah, we can add that. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my papers here. No outside storage or overnight parking. Okay, yeah, no, we can make a note of, on the lumber.
Yeah.
Is there any other use that you
Yes.
noted that would
Oh,
need that
on
as
that particular,
well?
no, not that,
Okay.
not that particular note.
Okay,
On 56, we have women's accessory and specialty stores. It's like the third one down. It has a note of 14, but we didn't have a 14.
uh-oh. Oh, I see that. I wonder if it should be number 5, like all the rest of those.
Maybe it's a,
Would that make sense if it was number 5? Maximum of 8,000 square
could be.
feet? It's probably supposed to be number 5. I was moving the numbers around and getting rid of ones
Yeah.
that didn't apply, so that was probably just a miss. I can correct that to number 5. Thank you.
and then one, it's just first for clarity, when you started to label items as like, where's the auxiliary? Number 6, so just for auxiliary use, no use permitted within single tenant building or multiple tenant retail center? So what's the difference then between that note and whether it's consideredly appropriate for live work? Because isn't live work within the same single tenant building? Isn't that the intent?
So the ancillary use, actually, that's nomenclature we've removed from the rest of the development code. It used to apply to primarily office buildings, which I think is probably, I don't remember which uses that ancillary use note applies to, but typically it would be an office building. You could have like a deli or a daycare center or something like that, but you may not be able to have that as just a standalone.
Yeah, I think we did some of that early on because we were trying to keep out of the strip center mode in this
Right.
particular tract. But if I look at like number 72, I would think that some of those could actually be a part of live work. But they're identified as auxiliary. So I don't
Okay.
know what I was just wanting clarity on the thinking there.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the idea here is that they're not necessarily standalone.
Because I think I know where I'm pretty sure that came from the discussions we had earlier on Tract H. Because we made some adjustments.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not
just
sure. I'm not sure where it originated. I did not make a lot of changes to the table from what the previous version was, other than adding those new uses. But if y'all see changes you would like to make, obviously we can make those. To your question of whether they would be appropriate in live work units, I'd ask you, I mean, if you feel like it's appropriate, we can certainly add that as that note. I think it's number 12. Again, what I did for the live work ones, I think I used the same uses as were shown as appropriate for live work in other parts. We don't have
Yeah.
any other live work units right
Right,
now,
right.
but I just kind of carried them over. But we can definitely make adjustments to that. Yeah, number 12. We
Well,
can
it just
add number
seemed,
12 to some of these.
some of them, not all of them, but some of them seem like you could maybe have something in the, in the
Like
back
a
end.
portrait studio or something
Right,
like that. Yeah.
Right. Like if you think about photographic studies, portrait, to me, that was
Sure.
like, you're taking, you might have a photo studio. My
Yeah.
other question along those same time, beauty shops are out, but barber shops are in. So, how'd that happen?
That doesn't seem right. I don't know. That's a good question. We can add, I don't know why one would be in and not the other.
Yeah.
We will groom the men, but not the women. I don't
Yeah.
know. We can add the other one. I think that, yeah. Okay.
And that's all I had. Thanks.
Questions?
Yes. Hi. So I'm looking at this, this document,
Okay.
okay? And it's page 14. And there's a definition of, item 4, there's a there's a definition for street width. And it says that the street right-of-way width shall be as shown on the master thoroughfare plan. And then you go on down below under F, under alleys, you describe in detail that it cannot be dead end, it cannot be hammerhead. It will be allowed to,
Are you in is that the Imperial item or is that the development code?
oh, that's the development.
That sounds like the development code.
Okay, scratch that.
Okay. You hold that for the next item.
The next one, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, they're all mixed up here. Okay. No,
Hey, Ruth. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great, thank you.
Good, thank you. My first comment is thank you to staff for going back. I think you heard from the commission last time how important it was. We go back and we talk to the residents. So thank you for that. The beauty of going third is she's answered most of my questions. So I
Wonderful.
appreciate you. Commissioner Smith, she did a lot. So to the speaker's questions tonight, is there anything that caps the number of residential units here in the code that would prevent this thing from becoming entirely residential?
There's nothing in the code or in the general development plan. If, trying to think, there's probably a couple of different ways that we could tackle that. For example, you could say that we could add a statement in here somewhere. I don't know where it would belong, but, there needs to be some element of commercial in a portion of this property or, something along those lines. I'm trying to think if there's any other.
Did that question come up at all when you had the meeting with the 15 people?
I don't recall that specific. I mean, we talked a little bit about kind of how it would come forward and how the commercial and the residential would be integrated.
It's
Mary,
more
was
because
that
we
the
don't have a
meeting?
layout, right? Because
Right.
there's not a plan. And so there were questions around, well, what is this going to look like?
Yeah.
How big are the lots? What, that sort of got into what kind of housing. And so I think until we know, but there might be something, but this would have to be maybe another land use change is to limit the amount of residential. In other areas we're saying we need that, we can have this many units, but.
Right.
We keep talking about rack and knack, and we've got this opportunity here to hopefully develop into another town square of some sort, but if we fill it up with homes,
Yeah.
and none of us have a crystal ball, right? We don't know what this is going to end up looking like. Will a developer even come along? But it would seem to go to the spirit of the land use plan on some level if we could have some sort of guarantee or a number that would at least ensure some sort of use beyond residential use in this development.
I think I would be hesitant to try and come up with a percentage or a number. I know, what I do know is that we know with certainty that there is a market for more residential. We are sorely in need of more heads in our community, more beds in our
I get
community.
that. I understand that, yeah.
And we have more retail and than we probably need on the whole. Now, is it in this location so that it would be walkable? Not necessarily, but I hear what you're saying and I hear what they're saying, that they would like that opportunity. And so I think maybe there's value in adding a statement that within this 30 acres, there has to be some commercial.
How do we get there? How do you do that?
I think we could literally add a statement to the general development plan that says that this cannot be entirely residential. It needs to have a mix of commercial and residential.
Can you do that without a number? Can you do that without saying it's 10% or 12% or 18%? Because otherwise it's an unenforceable, it's just simply,
But there will be final development plans that come forward. And so at that point, it's the commission then that, and council that decides if it's in alignment.
so anything that goes in here will come back for.
Correct.
As we normally do.
Correct.
Okay. I think it's important to capture that.
Okay.
And then if it comes, for anything that comes back, we need to footnote it that this is an item that needs to be discussed because there will be some here that may move on to council or whatever. And I think we just need a reminder of that.
Sure. No, we can find a place where it makes sense to add a statement about, the final development plan, including a mix of both
A
residential
desire to
and
have,
commercial uses.
or whatever. That would be great.
Okay.
I think that's good. Thank you.
Maybe
Thank you
under
for that.
D, where land uses. Yeah, I think that might be a good place for it.
To your point, you were required, right?
Yeah, I would say that, because I heard required first, then you said desired, but I think we need to use the word required.
Sure.
It sort of fits in that space anyway, because there's a huge medical building on one end, so.
Sure. Yeah, I think on that corner, you're
And-
likely to see some more.
And then across the street, there's, I don't know what's going to be in this little strip center that's being built.
And I think this will
but there's
self-heal
something
because
else.
if you get some residential there, you're gonna attract some people that want to build something that is complementary and supports the neighborhood around there. So, but other than that, again, thank you. I appreciate you listening to us and listening to constituents. It's very important. So thank you. Nice job.
Okay, I have some questions.
Okay.
Can you talk to us about the request here is for a general development plan, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just for everyone's benefit, what's the difference between a general development plan and a final development plan?
Good question. So they are both part of the PD process, the Plan Development District, which is a customized zoning district. In this case, like I said, originally there was a general development plan that was established for the entire Imperial property. We are kind of whittling it down to just look at this particular area, and it establishes kind of the initial parameters, the approach to the area, without knowing exactly what the final plan is. So we're trying to sort of set it up for future development. And then a final development plan will come forward where there will be a layout. If there are residential lots, they're typically shown on a layout. And then you'll be able to see kind of where the different land uses are, where the roads would be. You can look more closely at the setbacks at that point in time. That proximity to the lake, we can definitely take a look at that during the final development plan. So it helps because you have that layout, and so you can really see what the plan is for the area to be able to kind of hone in on the plan.
Right. So if we were to pass a general development plan here, that's not guaranteeing that anything happens, right? It's just simply
Right.
opening up the realm of possibilities
Right.
of what could be done in that space. Is that right?
Right, and there's
And then-
no development rights with
Right.
the general development plan. They still have to do that final.
And then when a final development plan is brought forth, would that have to be for the entire tract?
Not as it's written right now, and I don't think there's anything in the code that would require that. I think if that's something that the commission desires, we would need to put that probably in the general development plan. Or if there's a minimum, 30 acres is pretty large, so I could see it
No,
potentially
but
coming in two
here's why
pieces,
here's
but-
why I'm asking that. Okay. And to Commissioner Brown's point, we don't know if it's going to be 100%. It's theoretically possible that someone could want to do something, and that tract that we are being asked to recommend approval of a general development plan could be 100% residential, correct? That's a theoretical possibility.
For the final development plan?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
without the addition that
And-
we talked about, if that doesn't get added,
Correct.
yes.
And again, without that addition, the reverse is also possible. There could be a final development plan that has zero residential
That
in
is
there.
true.
Is that right?
Yes.
And so you don't really know either way. So and I think that's important to point out. And rather than always putting it on the commission, I mean, I know we talk and we have preferences and things like that. Let me turn the question around. What is city staff's vision for this property?
I think I would actually, it's in alignment with what the speaker said of having the residential with some kind of supporting services, maybe a coffee shop or, some small commercial areas that could serve those neighboring areas. But I think we do think it would be beneficial if it was mostly residential, because we do have that need for more residential and we have so few opportunities for it in the city that this is, a great place to do that.
Do you think this PD or this general development plan that you're asking us to recommend approval of, does that accomplish that vision in your estimation?
I think it can. It just depends on what the final development plan is that comes forward. I mean, there's probably some tweaks we need to make to some setbacks and things like that to really make it that, sort of neighborhood activity center vision. But I think it's close.
Okay, I mean, that's fair. I appreciate the interaction on this issue. I mean, I'm very sensitive to what we just heard from the residents regarding, what they were told about what that neighborhood was going to look like. And the lawyer in me wants to say some stuff about that, but I'm not going to. But I just think it's important. So I think you're doing the right thing by getting input. I mean, I'm going to, as I'll say in a minute, I actually would like to see a little bit more, where I am on the public comment. I mean, I see the 200-foot lines or whatever we draw around that, and we get like a sliver of the homes in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of other voices that I think we would want to hear from. The reason I asked about how it would work and whether the whole tract would be subject to a final development plan is this. So you've heard from several commissioners, you've heard from the community, a few members of the community, you've heard from the commissioners, that it seems like there's a desire for this to truly be mixed use, right? So I'm just going to flag this. If the final development plan comes back before the commission, I may or may not be on it at that time, and same is true for everyone else. No one has a crystal ball.
Sure.
And let's say the final development plan was 100% residential, probably not going to fly. If it's 0% residential, you probably wouldn't bring it. But that's probably not going to fly. And I don't know that that's where we want to be. In other words, do we want to be to the point to where we open it up? And by the way, I'm for this conceptually. I don't mean to make it sound like I'm not. I mean, I'm open to the concept, because what you're really asking us to do is open this tract up for some other possibilities.
Right.
And I don't know if that increases or decreases the likelihood of a final development plan coming to fruition. I mean, I'm mindful of the fact that this property, was zoned the way it was 13 years ago. And in the ensuing 13 years, no one has thought, hey, maybe we should open this up to residential. So, and if I'm reading the staff report correctly, it's not like there's something lurking out there. Right. This is just to dangle the carrot and open up some possibilities. And I'm totally for that. I'm totally for that. And we absolutely have heard from the community and from council and all that. We need more residential options. Okay, I'm for that. But my question is this really how we want to do it, to where we say yes to opening up some possibilities, and then, you go down the road with one of these projects and you bring it before us, and it's like, well, but this is not the vision, so no. And then someone else, well, this is not the vision, no. So in a perfect world, I think this would kind of, whatever we're doing here would articulate the vision more. And I just want to be mindful of how this is going to work on a process basis if we don't do something to articulate that now.
Sure.
So let me ask a couple of other questions on this as well.
Okay.
I'm going to ask probably the dumbest question I've asked in my tenure as on P&Z, or the smartest, one or the other. Every description I've read says this is 30 acres west of Highway 6. How in the world?
That's east of Highway 6.
Like, I thought I knew my directions. Like, it's even called out wrong on the agenda item, right?
Is it really?
This is all east of Highway 6.
Yes, it is.
Right? So all that needs to be fixed too, correct? Yeah.
Is that what it says?
Because I saw this, I'm like, oh, we're
Agenda
going
item in
to
front of me.
be asked to do some stuff over
On
by
the
the
airport.
airport. I'm like, no. And then I literally spent 20 minutes today, don't tell my clients this,
Oh,
I
my
spent
goodness.
20 minutes looking at the map thinking, do I understand how a compass works and direction? And I thought I did, but then but anyway, so that needs to be fixed.
Thank you for
too.
that.
In any event. I was going to ask about the community feedback from the 15 residents. You know, I didn't see a summary of what it was. It sounds like, though, that from the interaction with Commissioner Smith, that some of that came to fruition. And then I have a question about, and this is really ticky-tack, but on the map for the proposed future land use, is that, I'm terrible with color, but is it actually the right color? I think I have a hard
it's the
time
pink,
telling the
the bright
difference
pink.
between RAC, NAC, and neighborhood and commercial services.
Yeah, I don't have that.
So these aren't paginated, but it's on the future land use map. It's like
Yes.
3 pages
Yes, I've got it.
into the material. I honestly just can't tell if that's the right color or not.
It is.
Okay, I'll trust you on that one. All right. Well, again, it makes sense to me, and I get it. I still think there's a lot of work to be done, and I guess my never say last question, never say how many questions you're going to ask, but I'll ask this. So what is the process for integrating some of the things that you heard from tonight? Like I heard some permitted uses might get lined out or modified. What is the process for that?
So provided that the commission agrees with those requested changes, and I can kind of flip through my pages at the end here and make sure I captured all of them, I can make those changes prior to taking it to city council for the ordinance.
But we'll need to call, if there's a motion, we'll need to call those out and
Right.
include them in a motion. Otherwise, we're approving what's on the paper.
Right,
And I
right.
think we all agree that needs to be
Some
tweaked.
tweaking.
Okay, other questions for staff?
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. When we were before together last time, this thing failed in a 4-4 vote. The next step naturally for this would have been to have gone to council. That obviously didn't go to council.
Right.
Why didn't it go to council, and did we get feedback from council on that?
I don't think we've gotten feedback directly from council, certainly not as a whole. We did not take it to council because we knew we needed to go to the community. And with those changes, we felt like it would be better to have a positive recommendation if we could get that from you before going to council. And so we thought it was better to come back and share with you the changes that we made.
Thank you.
And then take it to council.
Okay, other questions? All right. Do I hear a motion?
Would you like me to read off the changes?
Well, I don't know if anyone's going to make a motion, and I don't want to waste your
Okay.
time.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve with conditions, and I think we need to walk through those that we have.
All right, so first of all, let me call it. We'll do consideration and action on a recommendation for a proposed amendment to the Imperial Land Plan and PD General Development Plan GDP for Imperial Highway 6, Tract H, approximately 30 acres of land located, it says here, west, we all know that's wrong now, of State Highway 6 between Imperial Boulevard and Crown Garden Boulevard in the Alexander Hodge League, abstract number 32, to the member city council. I've got a motion that P&Z make a recommendation of approval for this item with modifications. Is anyone going to second that? All right, I've got a second from Commissioner Dawood. And now let's talk about let's further discuss. We're not voting yet. Let's further discuss what the specific conditions are. Why don't you read the list of what you have
Okay.
taken down from our discussion, and then we'll add or subtract to that, and we will incorporate that into the motion.
Okay.
Okay?
So on Exhibit B, under Section D, land uses, we're going to add that final development plans must have a mix of residential and commercial uses, something along those lines. On also Exhibit B, F to B, that is the residential lots with rear access, and then it's under item 7. We're going to strike number 2, which is the 25 feet for lots facing Ulrich Street. I'm going to flip through each of my pages here so I don't miss anything. Under Exhibit B2, permitted uses for retail trade number 52, lumber and other building materials, which is number 5211, we're going to make a note that there will not be any outside storage allowed. For SIC 5632, under apparel and accessory stores is listed, women's accessory and specialty stores, that note 14 should be a number 5. Under the services category, SIC number 72, we are going to add SIC 7231, which is beauty shops, with the note number 6. And then we're also, there was conversation about the photographic studios portrait, SIC 7221 being in the live work units. And I wrote that down. We'll have to confirm if that's desired by the commission. I think that was it on B2. And I believe that's all I have. Did I miss anything?
Any clarification on those listed potential amendments or further amendments?
I do. So Ruth, my question is this. Previously, this was all slated for commercial development, no residential.
Correct.
We're going to add the residential uses here, and there's a chance, albeit small, this thing could swing completely the other way and become all residential,
Right.
even though we're calling for this to be somewhat commercial or have a commercial component. So my next question is, if we do that, and let's say we say 25% commercial, the rest residential, if that's the recommendation that we make, if you were to need to modify that, you would simply come back and modify the PD at a later date if something were to come in, or correct? So I'm saying if we set a number today, that if for some reason this was still not workable in 4 years and we weren't getting the traction we needed, it could be revisited.
Sure.
Do we understand what was promised? Do we have any idea what was promised to the residences previously, or this area? Was it 100% commercial?
I believe it's been shown as commercial for quite some time on the plans that Johnson Development.
And so we have nobody right now that's looking at this either from a commercial or residential standpoint. We're modifying this so that we can hopefully get some interest in this area, right?
We have received interest for commercial, but it has been for essentially strip centers with parking lots, large parking lots.
Okay.
And so that's where we were we felt like the choice between that and more residential of this type would probably be preferred.
So I would like to see, at least as a starting point, that we put a number on the number of retail and or however you want to do this in residential. And if that can be modified, right, with the understanding that we just talked about, that in 2 years, if this needs to be revisited, we can. And I think that number, and my commissioners may disagree with me, should, I think, as a starting point, be at 50%. And you can make a determination in 2 years if you've got someone that comes forward with a larger development or you need to modify it.
I'm going to jump in on this. How do you define, how, as measured by what? And I guess
Land use?
I get what you're saying, but like, so just what, it's 60 acres, so 30, you would do it by total
It's 30
area?
acres.
30 total.
30 acres.
I'm sorry.
15?
You can correct my math, lawyer math. Not good. Okay, so you could do it like that?
It can
But
actually,
can-
it can actually be subdivided into smaller tracts and sold off in smaller tracts, and it would still have this overriding land use on it. So the 50/50 would actually come from if a developer goes in and they want to do retail on the first floor, they would have to do retail on the second floor as well. And then they could do 2 floors of residences. And it could still be done in a way where it's you know.
I'm not sure I understand that.
We could get
You
way
do
into
it
the
by
weeds.
I don't think
by
we're gonna-
square footage.
We're not going to get vertical mixed use in this case because it's townhomes and urban homes, and that's the only kind of residential that
Right.
is permitted.
So let me ask it like this. So you see what the intent is. The intent is to try to place something in the document that encourages a true mixed-use development. Yes. And I think I share that sentiment. I don't know if the best way to do it is to put a number in it or not. I'm asking you, what is the best way to do that, Ruth?
I mean, I think you could put a number because more than likely, because it is going to be a horizontal mix versus a vertical mix. And so you could say by acreage, I would encourage you to consider going lower than 50%. I don't think that, I think it would be better to allow more residential than commercial. Again, we have a lot of commercial in the city. And so, you could have a coffee shop and a dry cleaners and maybe a small restaurant, and you could accomplish that probably in, 5 acres or something. And that's well under 50% of the site size. So if you were going to put a percentage, I would definitely encourage you to.
Look at what
But
I'm sorry.
at that.
Couldn't you change that in the final development plan anyway? Like if we said 50-50 and someone brought a plan and it was 60-40, wouldn't you just ask us to fix it then?
Yes. We did that with the buildings that are being built south of Talliard. We've done that.
Yes, that is a mechanism that you could use.
The other thing I think we've got to be careful about is the live work. So, I mean, it could be within the same residential footprint.
Yeah, if it's all
So,
the. yeah,
I would,
good point.
I would probably just classify that as residential.
okay.
Yeah. Because it's
Didn't want us to get
predominantly
too much in the weeds
residential.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if I had to throw a number out, I wouldn't go more than like 30% commercial, 25. Yeah, I was even initially thinking like 15, but if we're going to find a middle ground here, you are right. You could adjust that during the final development plan, but that's a higher hill to climb. It's a harder. I don't know. I think we know that we need more.
Matt, knowing
housing.
that live work would be classified as a
As
residential facility, I would be more apt to agree with the 30 or maybe even the 25.
Your
So
amendment.
I would make the recommendation at 25.
Okay.
Okay, so we're adding the recommendation that 25% of the developable
The land.
acres on the property be residential.
Commercial.
I'm sorry, commercial. I'm sorry. Okay,
I think 50% is better, I'm sorry, because they have an opportunity to come back and fix it. Right now, we don't know who's going to come, what kind of development is going to come. It's sat there for 13 years. There's nothing in sight. So given that the residents around us are concerned, a concession at 50% is, a good concession. Otherwise, you're leaning heavily into residential, which is what their concerns are. And this property is directly across from the airport. It's adjacent to Talliard, so it does lend itself to be commercial. I think a 50-50 chance of bringing a developer with an idea that, we can revisit is simpler. So that's where I am.
well,
You have two motions.
okay. Yeah, I got to figure out how to do this. If we don't agree on a number,
Commission, may I add a little bit of color, I guess, to this conversation just for further consideration?
Sure.
Since we're kind of, yes, some of the conversations that we've had, even with interested housing developers, recognize that Highway 6 is a heavily trafficked area, and so there, it would be likely that some area of it along Highway 6 would be commercial and the other areas of it would be residential. So I think that some of these things, I know it's hard, we want certainty. Some of these things will be determined by the market as well. And so how do we kind of provide some of that level of flexibility? Whatever percentage you might have, every conversation I ever have with a developer, their first question always to me is, what is the city's vision for this area? And so pending...
I asked that question too.
Pending how the intent is put or the percentage is put, yes, there is always the option that somebody could come back and come in front of you to do a final development plan and change that. But that's going to be their first impression of the city, of what the city's intention or vision is for the area. And they might not be amenable to staff saying, oh, but we can change that. They're going to see that as that's the city's message of what our vision and intent is for the area. So although, yes, it can be changed, that will be their first impression. So I just say that in terms of keeping that in mind as we kind of continue to encourage development to occur in the area.
Okay, thank you. So friendly amendment, okay, on the 25%, I would propose language that says that a substantial portion of the developable land be dedicated to commercial use.
So rather than having a percentage?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you okay with that? You're not?
Substantial.
Okay.
What is substantial?
Well,
Define
do you accept that as an amendment to your motion?
With one question, is substantial a defined term? And we know it's not.
Exactly.
So
It's even worse than 25%.
substantial to me would mean 51%.
Right.
If I was to
But you don't like it, so apparently it doesn't mean that.
Well, it's undefined.
I know. Well, I'd like to see this, look, I'd like to see this move forward.
I would too.
I'm
Here-
reading the tea leaves right now.
So-
it's not gonna move forward. I can prove that by putting it to a vote.
Let me say this and add this color to it, is we've got, for, by definition, 2.5 residents here out of however many we notified that are here. And I think the commission is going a long way in trying to accommodate making sure that we do this, because, do we not have more people here because we didn't reach more people? And that's always the question. I would be amenable to the 25% mark simply because I think we're adhering to the spirit of the development of what's there, with the ultimate understanding that this thing could be modified at any time by coming back before the commission. And I think if someone came to us with a grand development plan, I don't think we'd say no to it, because we've all been looking at this tract for a very long time. And the other question is, why hadn't it been developed? Could be very simple as pricing. And that may be why that tract hasn't developed. Not because of use, but because of pricing. So I'd be, again, my consideration here, or my recommendation is for a 25% number.
Okay, so that's the proposed amendment. And then I'm gonna add to that, all the descriptions need to be changed to say east.
Got it. To clarify on that requirement, so we're saying that 25% of this 30-acre, almost 30 acres, needs to be, at least 25% needs to be commercial.
Correct.
So there's no minimum amount of residential, just a minimum amount of commercial. Is that correct?
Right, with the intent being to try to have it to be truly mixed use.
Right.
Right. Okay, so
One just clarifying question. So if a developer were to come to ask, what's the vision, what would you point him towards as the vision for this area?
The land use plan and the neighborhood activity center.
So in the land use plan, I was trying to get, I don't think we have a full copy of it.
Yeah.
I didn't go back to it, but in there, have we changed it? I know we, changed it around to add residential, but is there more robust wording in that around the desire to have a mixed use?
well, it'll be an
Area.
act now.
Yeah.
An act, okay.
And I'm not trying to, I didn't mean
No,
to
but I
interrupt.
think that's the part,
I mean,
you know, it's,
If you're going to put me to the land, point us to the land use plan.
yeah,
We're also being asked to now make it a neighborhood activity center, right?
Right, and also.
Which theoretically means something.
Right. Lisa also just reminded me that under land uses, it does say, this GDP aims to encourage development that integrates compact residential land uses with compatible non-residential uses like office and commercial/retail facilities.
Yeah.
This includes compact forms of residential such as townhomes and urban homes. The goal is to create small-scale walkable environment for nearby neighborhoods characterized by the design and arrangement of buildings to create a pedestrian experience. Development should seamlessly integrate with the surrounding residential neighborhoods and existing commercial development.
right.
So
if
we would
some-
also point to that.
So if somebody came with a plan that was almost 100% residential, we'd say, hey, this doesn't meet what
Yeah.
the vision is for this particular tract.
It would come back before the
For us,
commission.
right.
And the then commissioners would,
Right, exactly. But I think for
Say
me,
yea or
that's
nay.
sort of what we
Yeah.
can, you know, that
Kinda
is
hang your
something
hat
that we
on.
can go back to and say, hey,
Sure.
this is the reason why this is not working.
Right.
Right?
yeah. And I, okay.
It may be easier to do that than to try to argue percentages, is where I was trying to get at.
I understand. Okay, so what I heard is I had a motion to make a recommendation of approval on this item as modified with a second, with the modifications that we've just discussed are clearing up the description, adding the language about a minimum of 25% being dedicated for commercial purposes, the change that you mentioned regarding the 25-foot lot spacing, the change on the lumber and building materials to include no outside storage, changing the note from 14 to 5 on the permitted uses chart, and the modification to the services to add beauty shops with note 6. And that's everything I got.
Did we want to add, did you add the portrait studios to live work? Was that a yes?
Portrait studios to live work, yes.
Okay.
That should be in there too. So
Okay.
we've got a motion as modified. Those are the proposed modifications. There's a second. I'm going to ask you to vote. One, two, three, four. That's a 5-1 vote in favor of the motion. All right. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much.
Staff. Thank you, the members of the public who addressed the commission. As
Yeah,
can
thank you,
see,
staff.
Those, it's important to speak up, and you did, and I appreciate your presence and your input onto this item. And I don't always say that. All right. Now, because that was so much fun, we will do 4B. At this time, we are going to discuss the proposed amendments to chapters 2, 5, and 10 of the Sugarland Development Code. Hello, Jessica.
Hello.
This should
Good
be less
evening.
controversial.
Okay, all right. Maybe. Yeah.
And I say that for the members of the public. This was before us in our last meeting. We
Yes,
had
just 2 weeks
substantial
ago.
feedback to this
Yes.
item. I expect we're going to hear that all of that's
Yes.
been incorporated,
Yes, it
cleaned up,
has.
but I'll let you say that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So this is the public hearing for this item, which is a proposed amendment to chapters 2, 5, and 10 of the Sugarland Development Code. Just a quick overview of this item. First, I'll go over some background. Again, that was covered at the workshop, but just as a recap, since this is the public hearing. And then I'll recap the workshop and the feedback provided by the commission and the changes that have been made. And then go through the summary of changes to chapters 2, which are the zoning regulations, chapter 5, which are the subdivision regulations, and chapter 10, which are definitions, highlighting those points of feedback and where those were changed. And then we'll have the public hearing, and then following the public hearing, staff is available to answer any additional questions or provide clarifications. And then staff is recommending that the commission hold consideration action tonight as well. So going over the background, so the proposed amendment is part of staff's ongoing effort to modernize and streamline development code. The commission has seen quite a few amendments that have come forward in the last 2 years, ranging from minor modifications and clarifications to the code to new districts being adopted from the Alcoholic Beverage Overlay District in 2023, the adoption of the Lake Point Redevelopment District, which is proposed being amended tonight at the end of 2023, and then most recently the Sign Overlay District at the end of 2024. Following the first amendment to the Lake Point Redevelopment District regulations that was approved and adopted in June of 2024, a subdivision regulations task force was established in July of 2024 with the primary focus of reviewing the subdivision regulations and the city's design standards to ensure alignment with the Lake Point Redevelopment District regulations, which again were adopted in December of 2023. The subdivision regulations had not been updated with the adoption of these new regulations, so we just wanted to ensure that we were getting the review of those regulations by our public works departments, utilities, redevelopment, police, fire, engineering, parks, and planning to make sure that those regulations aligned with these new district regulations. In addition to that, the proposed amendment is also supporting the city's own initiative of fostering sensitive redevelopment with the key objectives of fostering a redevelopment-friendly environment by updating codes and policies to encourage strategic development and preparing key sites for redevelopment by leveraging land in key areas, for example, Imperial and Lake Point. So to recap the workshop that was held at the March 11th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, a lot of the feedback focused on these 3 sections. Section 2-6, that is for site plan requirements. So the commission directed staff to specify in that section that site plans are now required for triplexes, fourplexes, and sixplexes instead of using the term multiplex, since it was a little confusing. The commission also directed staff to add to section 2-120 a minimum caliper requirement for trees that are planted in the pedestrian enhancement zone. And then to section 10-3, the commission directed staff to clarify some of those definitions for dwellings since it was hard to find them. So all of those have been incorporated into the draft that was provided, bless you, provided tonight. So starting off with chapter 2, which are again the zoning regulations, the first change that was to section 2-6, site plan packages. Originally it was that the site plan submittal requirement was for multiplexes. Underline is now what the requirement is going to be is that triplexes, fourplexes, and sixplexes have been added to that requirement in addition to the current developments that require site plan submittals. For section 2-119, lot layout and site design regulations, there used to be regulations for minimum block length and maximums for block length specific to the Lake Point Redevelopment District. With the task force, we found that there are already regulations for our standard districts regarding block length minimum maximums. So we found that it was just to simplify the code to add it in the same place so that when staff is reviewing and when a developer, engineer, anything like that comes to review, it's all in the same place and it's easy to read. Also provided clarification that trees and shade structures shall be used to provide shade for pedestrians in the pedestrian realm. And that is through we also provided clarification that shade structure shall be used to provide shade when on-street parking is located in the pedestrian enhancement zone. As a refresher, the addition of allowing on-street parking in the pedestrian enhancement zone was approved in that June, or it went to the commission, I think, in April, but it was approved by City Council in June of 2024. And so as further cleanup, we wanted to provide clarification that if you're gonna have on-street parking, you can't plant trees there. So shade should be provided to those pedestrians in that zone through the use of shade structures like canopies and awnings. We also provided a minimum vertical clearance for shade structures if utilities are placed under the clear zone, which is also sidewalk. It's just a different term for it. To section 2-119 continued. We also removed the separation requirements that conflicted with Article 7 of the subdivision regulations and renamed that subsection cross-access for the remaining requirements. There was a question at the recap of what those regulations were. So provided as part of the agenda item, there was the addition of the regulations for driveway separation, which is section 5-51 in the subdivision regulations, just so that they could be referenced of what the existing driveway separation requirements are, but there are no proposed changes to that section. And we also added a reference for the design standards for the construction of on-street parking. And then to section 2-120, pedestrian realm enhancements, we clarify that pedestrian lighting poles and bollards should be spaced at even intervals. This is the document that was provided earlier at the beginning of the meeting, that there's been a minor change to this section. So there is a clean version and a red line version that was provided to replace the section. There's one for you, Chair, at that. I don't know if you got it. I placed it on that table. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so it has the minor change to it. So it's to replace pages 9 and 10 in the Chapter 2 zoning regulations red line draft, and then to replace pages 8 and 9 of Chapter 2 zoning regulations clean draft. And the only change that we had made was after speaking with our Public Works Department, that they wanted to ensure that it was clear that all of these pedestrian amenities should comply with the city's design standards. So instead of saying that the pedestrian scale lighting bollards have to comply with the city's design standards, we just went ahead and moved that up to apply to the entire section. So that's what that minor change was. So we also, this was what was already in there, removed this tree spacing requirement and provided a minimum tree requirement based on the length of this tree frontage, instead of being strict in saying that based on this caliper, you have to plant it 40 feet, which it was 2.5 to 3-inch caliper, 20 to 35 feet, and then for 4-inch caliper trees, 35 to 40 feet. It was very strict, and with the allowance of the on-street parking and understanding that there are utilities in this area, we wanted to provide a little bit more flexibility. But following the workshop, it was recommended that we add in at least a caliper requirement. We also added in a height requirement. So now the requirement reads that one tree shall be provided for every 40 linear feet of street frontage or portion thereof, and trees must be at least 10 feet in height and have a minimum 4-inch caliper immediately after planting. Tree caliper is measured 6 inches from natural ground level. Because this is a little bit more of a strict requirement, and we still do understand that there are going to be times where maybe this is not feasible due to those utilities and stuff like that, we added in a minor deviation, or a director authority for a deviation from the requirements of this section, if there is an unusual site condition or to protect a natural feature or public infrastructure. So the natural feature being an existing tree. Think of all the large oak trees in the Lake Point area. If you already have an existing one, it's not good to plant another one next to it when you have utilities in that area. So that's what that addition was for. Moving on to section 2-121, building design and additional development standards, multifamily mixed use and non-residential development. This is where language was added that allows for the civic space to satisfy the parkland dedication requirements if one civic space contains recreational amenities as described in section 530.6, and 2, the Parks and Recreation Director approves the proposed recreational amenities. And then to section 2-122, building design, middle housing development, we increased the minimum muse width to 30 feet to accommodate utilities. It was previously a minimum requirement of 15 feet. Moving on to chapter 5, the subdivision regulations. This was discussed at the workshop, but as a reminder, there is a section on definitions within the subdivision regulations, as well as chapter 10, which also has definitions. Chapter 10 applies to the entire development code in its entirety. The definitions in chapter 5, section 5-3 are specific to those terms that are used in that chapter. So there were some terms that were used in the chapter that weren't referenced. So what we did was we added them as defined terms, and then instead of duplicating the definition, we just referenced chapter 10 because they were already defined there. To section 5-19 streets, we added a frontage requirement for middle housing in the Lake Point redevelopment district to max section 2-122, where it says that the housing in that development can front on a civic space, muse, or street. We wanted to match that in those street frontage requirements in the subdivision regulations. We also removed the pavement width for non-residential alleys to align with the design standards. That's already covered there. We didn't want the redundancy in the requirement. We also added clarification that residential alleys are only required if it's required by zoning. That is because we wanted to ensure that if there are any future districts that are added, if that is an alley designed residential development, that would apply to it then, that it would be covered in the zoning regulations, that they would need an alley, and then the standards that are in the subdivision regulations would apply. And then we also added prohibition of dead-end alleys with 2 exceptions. The current regulations are kind of loose in saying that they're not suggested, but you could do it. We wanted it to be clear and be like, it should not be done, but with the understanding that there are going to be times where it is not possible to not have a dead-end alley, so having stricter requirements for that. To section 5-20 blocks, we added in those minimum maximum block lengths that were previously in section 2-119 of the Lake Point Redevelopment District, as discussed earlier. And then to section 5-30 parkland dedication. This is also similar language that was added to the Lake Point Code, where civic space to satisfy the parkland dedication requirements if one civic space contains the recreational amenities as described in section 5-30.6, and 2, the Parks and Recreation Director approves the proposed recreational amenities. And then finally, the changes to chapter 10. So for definitions, we added clarification that Muse shall have frontage on a public street. Previously, that wasn't clear. So we want to ensure that it's not going to be sitting in alleys and stuff, that it has to have connection to a public street similar to the Muse that are in Telfair currently. And then also kept in the clarification that they can include utilities. And then we also added townhomes to the definition of middle housing, just to be clear and align it with the regulations that are in the Lake Point Redevelopment District. And then finally, we added the following definitions and included cross-references to the existing definitions for clarity and improved readability. This came out of the workshop in that direction. So if you will look into the drafts, you will see that the existing definitions remain. It just now references these new ones, and they're in alphabetical order because that was a concern of the commission at the workshop, that it was going to be very hard. No one was going to look under D for dwelling, live, work to find it. So because that's already how it was in there, we thought that it would be best to leave that definition, but just reference to the new one, which is the same definition. And so that way it's easier for people to find and understand. One also minor change that we did for the multiplex dwelling was recommended by Chair Gallagher of means any of those dwellings, just for increased clarification. And then here's an example of what that looks like. So you can see that the new definition, it's not really new, it's just kind of moved. It says live, work, dwelling, and then it's the same definition, and it includes the image. And then the existing definition, which was previously dwelling, live, work, says see, live, work, dwelling. So that way there's increased readability between those definitions. And since this is a public hearing, the public hearing notification requirements were met for an amendment to the development code. It was published in the newspaper of general circulation, and it was also posted on the city's website. We also have a dedicated development codes updates webpage that we keep live with our current development code updates that we're working on. So a draft that was presented tonight is on that website right now. And at this time, we have not received any inquiries regarding this proposed amendment, and staff is not aware of any opposition. And with that, staff is recommending approval of staff supports a recommendation of approval to members of City Council for the Development Code Amendment. And following the public hearing, staff is able to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the public hearing on item 4B. We will receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed amendments to chapters 2, 5, and 10 of the Sugar Land Development Code. Do we have anyone that would like to address the commission in public hearing?
We do not, Chair.
Going once, twice. I will close the public hearing and we will move on to consideration and action. Questions for staff?
Few quick questions. Yeah.
Please.
So on page 14, where you talk about the alleys, and I think this is under section 5-19.f. Item D, 4, street widths. You go on to say that street right-of-way width shall be as shown on the master thoroughfare plan, but then under alleys, there's actually no width defined for it, a minimum width. Does does it conform to something?
It's in the design standards, the minimum width. So we removed the 15-foot requirement because it's not actually the right-of-way width that's currently in the subdivision regulations. It's the pavement width. So it didn't really make sense for that to be the only regulation that's in the subdivision regulations. So we just took it out. It's already covered in the design standards. That includes the right-of-way width and the pavement width for a non-residential alley.
So the pavement is 15 or 30?
The pavement width is 15 for a non-residential alley.
Okay, that's the minimum.
That's the
right?
minimum pavement width, yes.
Okay. And then, and this is just a question that under section 2-120 pedestrian roam enhancements, where you go on to, you made the recommendations for the tree and the caliper and the distances, et cetera. And then you mentioned that the director, under item A3, that the director may allow or require minor deviations. You mentioned that, that deviation could be due to an infrastructure, underground utilities, or for an existing tree. Is there somewhere where you also could give credit for preservation of trees? Like maybe 3 credits for one tree that is preserved?
So, yeah, I think in this case, this instance of the Lake Point redevelopment district, since these regulations apply to it, that's being more looked at with the existing site itself, where a tree survey has been done to look at what's being saved. So I'm not sure if adding it specifically to this section would be the best place for that.
Where would it be then?
Most likely in a development agreement.
In a development agreement with
The developer of the site. Since these regulations are specific to Lake Point redevelopment district, they do not apply to our standard regulations.
And I think that's what I'm aiming at, that it should be part of this agreement.
Part of the regulations?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you may allow me, good evening. We had those internal conversations if we should put that in there, what that number should be, but since we're specifically looking at Lake Point and we know there are a number of trees out there, they will have to do a tree survey, and then we thought that it would be best to look at that through a development agreement, what that looks like. I have worked with certain instances on properties where you do have protected trees, and there were so many protected trees that in order to do any development on the replacement scale, you couldn't have replaced them at like, for every one protected tree, you had 2. It was physically impossible to do it on the site. So by going through a development agreement with that developer and what makes sense and how they want to do it, we have a better opportunity that we can save the trees, but also at the same time, you don't have a property that's going to be completely undevelopable.
No, I'm not saying that we say that you need to save 10% of trees. I'm just saying that, instead of, when you come back and do a development and you have to plant trees every so often off certain calipers, then for that developer to not have to do that, to invest money in that, they could, get credit by saying, okay, I'm going to save that tree in the corner, give me credit for 3 that I can use anywhere in my development as it fits the plan. So I'm saying if that can be written into this agreement today. A lot of times I've seen in other jurisdictions that a credit of 3:1 is fairly standard.
Yeah, we have it for our private trees and stuff, so trees on private property. These are more going to be the street trees. So we can look into providing that flexibility, but it is specifically for the street trees. So would it be for, just for clarification for staff, is it a credit for saving trees on streets that are going to be constructed where there are existing trees, or is it for any tree that's being taken down in the development?
Any tree.
Any tree? Okay, because these regulations are specific for the street tree requirements.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I know that, you're requiring for street trees to be planted so often and having a director to be able to say, no, you don't have to do this here because I have a manhole.
But it also, it says for protect a natural feature. So there is an existing tree there.
But a credit.
A credit,
Like,
okay.
If I have 1,000 linear feet and I'm required to do 30 trees, but I can come back and bank into this credit.
Okay.
And say, okay, I don't have to do 30 trees because I'm going to save 5 or 6 or whatever.
Okay, we can look into that.
But do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I think that's it.
And are you suggesting that as guidance for when they get into a developing agreement stage?
No, I was hoping that we just approve it with condition that they edit that language.
Are you, okay. And do you understand the language and
Yes.
are supporting that?
Yes, we can look into that. It'll probably have to be written in a way that's flexible since it is something that's probably going to be covered in the development agreement, but providing that flexibility when they come in for that, but it can also be covered more specifically with the existing trees that we know are going to be saved once the development agreement is under review.
Sure, I don't know what there's no motion, but I don't understand what's being proposed. I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
She's asking for a tree credit, to provide some flexibility for the requirement for the minimum street trees.
And you're saying you're going to look into that and figure out how to incorporate that
Into the development code, yes.
into the development code?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that's,
okay. If you're comfortable with that, then,
yeah, it's just a tree credit for preservation.
okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, I will make a motion recommending approval of the proposed amendments to chapters 2, 5, and 10 of the Sugar Land Development Code to members of the City Council, including the addition of language regarding a tree credit. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a second from Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? Please vote. 6-0, that passes. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to item 5A, liaison report from the City Council meeting of March 18th. Did anyone here have that meeting? 5B, city staff report.
Hello again. Your next meeting is going to be April 24th. It shall be a short meeting with a preliminary plat extension request that is being brought before you.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the commission or the city? Got a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Brown. I've got a second from Commissioner DeWoo. That motion passes. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.